I feel like most jiu-jitsu players don't train jiu-jitsu like as if it was, another sport, a soccer or football or basketball. Or those professionals, they show up and they do certain things in their sport that makes them better, and they evolve. They don't just show up and scrimmage each other every day, And I think in jiu-jitsu, that's all we do. We just show up and scrimmage every day. And I'm not saying this is what I do, because it's not. I don't show up in scrimmage every day, but I know that I need to show up and improve. If I don't improve on certain attributes and certain skills and certain positions and certain defense, certain offense, that you're just gonna stay tough. That's what happens in jiu-jitsu. A lot of guys just stay tough. They don't get good. They just stay tough.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down once again with Vagner Rocha. A quick shout out to Bubs Naturals and AG1 who sponsor the show. If you would like discounts for both those products that are instrumental parts of my daily health routine, check out the show notes, click the links, and get yourself some. If you want to see this podcast grow in 2024, support the show, and hear from more epic guests, please take 30 seconds. It is so easy. Take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Spotify. This helps the show get discovered organically and helps position it in front of other people that are listening to similar shows. And this matters a lot to me. I want this show to grow because of organic growth, because like-minded people are sharing it with other people in the jiu-jitsu and strength training community. The other way that you can support the show is simply by sharing it with a friend. Send it to a friend who loves jiu-jitsu, strength and conditioning, or human performance, and let them become part of the community. Vagner Rocha is a jiu-jitsu black belt, professional grappler, and former professional MMA fighter. He has fought in almost every major grappling promotion and recently came out victorious against all odds in a true David versus Goliath match in his karate combat submission grappling debut against South Africa's up-and-coming phenom, Luke Griffith. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Without further ado, for round 2, Vagner Rocha. Vagner, round 2, back on the show, another repeat offender. It's always fun to sit down again with people and have another conversation, but it's well-timed with your recent victory. So thank you, despite all the busyness, being back on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me and having me. And the first time was good, so I said, you know what, I like this.
Yeah, you are making me feel totally stoked about getting older and maintaining my output and not just buying into how age becomes this thing that beats you down, and then you think about the days of how things used to be. You're showing up against guys that are a fraction of your age, way more than you, and not even in just training, but on grand scales, you're showing that you can maintain your grappling output, you can maintain your mindset, and you can challenge all the views that people have around aging. So what did it feel like stepping in there against, again, not just like some guy who's up and coming, one of the most emerging names in Luke Griffith in the sport, and to have it go the way that it did?
Yeah, it's pretty surreal. It's amazing. Luke is a phenomenal competitor who is making his real breakthrough in the sport right now, and he's dominating and has been dominating most of the competition that's been put in front of him. Um, and it was definitely a little intimidating for me when I was asked to compete against him, because it was one of those like, what do I have to gain from this,
Right.
and why this for me now? Why is this even relevant or important? And the only thing I could put in my mind was like, man, this is a real challenge. Like, this guy is a huge individual, huge man, um, young, hungry, training in a very um, famous, infamous gym for great competitors. So the it was just a challenge in itself that just kind of like made me feel a little bit excited and nervous at the same time.
Yeah.
And I just went out there with no expectations. I said, I'm going to give my best, And I believe in myself, of course. I knew I could win. I wouldn't just step in there to lose. You know what I mean? Collect a check.
Right.
I don't think I ever have that mindset. I go in there always thinking I'm going to win. Sometimes you lose, and that's normal. But I had a real feeling that this was definitely a good opportunity for me to shine. And it's for Luke. It's also another great opportunity because he's gets to face somebody who's been in the game such a long time.
Right. Yeah, and he knows. I mean, going into that, he knows that you're not a pushover, right? I mean, you're someone who's gonna. Your style is and always has been a go forward, never stop, tenacious style. So that's, I mean, no matter who you are, that's something to accept going into that kind of thing too, right? For him,
Yeah.
when you, how long out were you for camp for this? Was this like enough time? Did you feel rushed?
It was a weird situation. This event, the Karate Combat, is a new. They created this new series to their event, and I got a call from the president of the event, Awesome, on I believe it was the week of between Christmas and New Year's,
Okay.
and he was like, "Hey, I'm doing an event. I don't know if you've seen it." And I'm like, "Oh, I know. I've known Awesome from Miami. He's here from Florida for a long time." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been watching. It's pretty cool, man. It's pretty awesome." I'm like thinking, like, why is he calling me? It's karate combat, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand where this is going.
You're
And
like, my
then
those
I'm
days
like,
are
I
over.
mean, I do have an MMA career
Right.
that I abandoned about 2017. I didn't retire. I just stopped because jujitsu
Yeah.
just started taking off, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to get hurt, and I want to watch my kids grow into jujitsu. So I want to
Yeah.
start focusing on jujitsu. Um, so I was like, maybe this is what he's calling me for. Maybe he wants me to like make my retirement fight or something. I don't know.
Right.
We knew each other for years, so I don't know what is on his mind. And he's like, no, no, no. I'm gonna do a grappling aspect in the pit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool. He goes, I got some names, from the New Wave group. I wanted to kind of see if you wanted to fight one of the guys from over there. And I'm like, who do you got in mind? And he's like, oh, Luke Griffith. And I'm like, I was like, do you? He didn't know who Luke was. I was like, do you know who he is? He goes, no, no. He's like, I'm friends with John, and John asked me that he wanted Luke to be part of the show. And
Yeah.
then I thought, maybe here in Miami, you could be a guy to face this guy. And I'm like, you don't know who he is, right? And he's like, no. I said, he's like 6'5",
Yeah. 100 kilo.
250. He's like, he's way out of my weight class. And,
Yeah.
and, and I don't know. That just doesn't sound like it makes sense. And he's like, so do you not want the match? And I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. But,
Right.
like, and he's like, all right, so what do you want to do? I said, well, first off, I don't handle any of my business. Everything that I do, I have a manager that I work with, whom I direct everything in his direction. I said, let's do this. Let's get this information over to Victor Doria, who's my manager, and see what he says. And he was like, all right, cool. So him and Victor start talking, and like 2 days later, Victor calls me and goes, hey, Luke Griffith, and I'm
You're
like,
like, do you know who he is?
yeah, he knows. He knows. This guy
Yeah,
knows.
he
Victor
knows.
knows. He clearly knows who Luke is because he manages some of the best guys in the world, and he knows. He's like, yeah, I'm like, I mean, he's like, it's a great match, and I'm like thought to myself, I was like, why is it a great match? He's like, it's a huge challenge for you, and for even for him, but mostly for you because he's the guy who's everybody talking about right now. And I'm
Right.
like, and then that's when that things started turning in my brain, and I'm like, it is a challenge. It's a huge challenge. A guy who had a year that he had last year, like for me to take this match at the beginning of this new year, huge.
Right.
And that started happening. The conversation started happening, and then the guys started negotiating a contract and finances, and I didn't get a contract, to be truthful, signed for the event till 3 or 4 days before the event. So even I
But
was
you
kind of
were
like,
but you were you were training like
yeah, I
you
was.
were training
I
like that you were
started
gonna get
training
it.
like it was gonna
Yeah.
happen, but I wasn't. You never know. Somebody tells you, hey, we're gonna do this, and then things change. You know what I mean? and they didn't even sell tickets for this event. They didn't promote this event. They were basically on invitation only. So it was a
Because
bunch of
this was
celebrities.
to paint the picture. This was so Karate Combat has their their regular fights, and this was a kickback event that hybrids showcasing grappling, and then also having I think boxing and
No,
Karate
it
Combat,
was
right?
like karate, just karate kickboxing type stuff.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
And their rules are different than I think it's not an MMA fight, but it's different than what I would imagine karate rules are probably like. So
and
it's
your round was it was 15-minute bout straight through. uh I guess similar rule set to ADCC would be like the closest in
no,
terms of
I think
engagement.
we're more like towards maybe a who's number one rule set where it's submission
Okay.
only, where they're looking for the aggressor who's really chasing the submission. That kind of format, fight to win started this I think years ago,
Mhm.
and many people have spun off his idea. So it's something like that. But it was a long match with just an individual. The cool part about it is exactly that, is that we were so different from each other,
Yeah,
size wise, that it became like a David versus Goliath kind of match, like an absolute.
totally.
Everybody loves seeing absolute matches because of
Yeah,
that, because it's some big guy and a small guy, and sometimes the small guy wins.
yeah,
So it brought that energy to it. I could hear the crowd, I could hear the people, and the promoter. He nailed that with that
yeah.
idea. So
I think that it's one of the cool things about. So I watched this whole match live. I was trying to get it timed well, and I happened to click in just when you were walking out. So it was like perfect case scenario. Watch the whole thing, and I'm like, this is to some degree, this is what you need. Like the sport of jiu-jitsu needs this because it is the use case for jiu-jitsu. It's someone who's smaller is using technique, tenacity, and skill to overcome a larger opponent. I mean, how many people out there that are smaller people wouldn't want to learn how to do that? And
yeah,
to see it, it had everything. You guys had takedowns, defenses, submission attempts, reversals. Everything was on display in a dynamic. I think for the people that don't train jujitsu, I'm always looking for that place where they could be introduced and be excited about it. Something about this match kind of had some of that, where I think you could actually be on the couch with people that don't train, and you could watch this and they could go on a basic level, wow, that guy's huge. Wow, that guy's not as big as him. Holy shit, these guys are going hard. And that's kind of what you want someone to walk away with and go, that was cool.
yeah, it was.
Outside of like MMA, right? You can take anyone and show them a boxing match or a mixed martial arts. Guy gets head kicked and knocked out, and someone's like, "Whoa, I can watch more of this." Grappling's hard. It's intricate. It's technical. You have to have somewhat of an understanding. But this was a good example of use of jujitsu against a dynamic opponent. Lots of back and forth, and your heart and conditioning to the end was on display. I mean, that part was really cool for me as someone watching this. Did you feel like at what point through that 15 minutes did you start to feel that edge? Because it was super apparent. I don't know if it was the humidity in Miami or what, but you can see it when you're watching it that there's a change in the tide and you just bury the gas pedal.
Yeah, I have one of my biggest attributes is that a lot of people, that I train with and I compete against, they tend to always point that out. I have a really good ability to manage the match
Mm-hmm.
at a point, and then I turn a gear, and then I turn the car on, and I just run faster than most of my opponents that I end up beating. So in the first 3 minutes, I felt like he gave me a huge part of himself. Like he overwhelmed me. He like threw me down, kind of like had me in trouble, made me defend a mount, maybe defend my neck, maybe defend my back. And I feel like after I got up, and then maybe that was in the first 2 minutes after I got up, and he literally was trying to force me back down, like trying to big brother
Like
me,
bully
right?
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
bully me, big brother me,
Yeah.
and I'm not a stranger to training with big guys. I train with big guys all the time. A lot of people they get scared of training with people that are bigger than them, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't tend to train with guys that are not in their weight classes. They rather train with a guy who's smaller than training with a guy that's clearly way out of their weight class. and I don't mind that at all. It's not. I've always trained with much bigger opponents in the rooms, and I feel like there's a huge challenge in that in training. You know, if you
Yeah.
get manhandled by somebody bigger than you need to understand how to deal with that. So I've always never been that's never been a problem for me. And when I was able to kind of shake him off in the first little bit, I could tell he had that like thought in his mind, like, "Damn, this is not going to be as easy as it normally is."
Right.
Where he, if you watch his matches, they don't really last 5 minutes. There's never there hasn't been a
Yeah.
match that I saw in the last year of his competition scene that he it lasted a year. That the match lasted 5 minutes. So he I feel like he gave me what he had, and then as the match started to move and I started to make him move and I was pushing him around and I was bullying a little bit back towards that second half where we hit that 6 minute mark, I heard people screaming the time. I could
Yeah.
feel him just different. Like he wasn't the same anymore. And then I just started picking up that pace, and
Yeah.
then I started to put essentially the heat on him within the last 4 minutes of the match, you know? So it, yeah, I think there was a moment like at the right in the middle of the match where I felt this is not the same guy that grabbed me in the first minute, you know? So
Yeah, I think it's a very honest reflection of what happened. Like for as a fan and a viewer, the first couple minutes were you were kind of like, oh shit, it's gonna go like this, to the ground on top of you, and it's like, well, he's defending really well. Oh, he's out of there. Wow, they're back up. Okay, and then you see this back and forth when you're training. There's so many people that are up against exactly what you just talked about in the training room, which is this. I don't want to train, especially on the hobbyist level. I don't want to train with someone bigger because that's where the risk of injury is the greatest. Just if that person falls on you, the likelihood that that fall produces a popped rib, wrist, whatever, is higher. So people tend to stray away from it. How do you manage that? Like, what's kind of your advice to people that want to take on that challenge of training with bigger people? I would put myself in this bucket. I do
uh,
it, but I tend to do it when my body is really online. But you want to do more of it because that's the most useful skill. It's like, can I defend myself against someone who's bigger or stronger than me? So what's a good way to integrate that into your training to take those steps outside of your comfort zone, do it in a safe way, but also make your jiu-jitsu elevate?
take 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 the ability to become comfortable with whomever that person is that might make you feel uncomfortable to ask to roll. Have a conversation and say, "Hey, I want to roll with you, but I'm scared that you're going to hurt
Yeah.
me." Have that conversation. Be real with it. Like, I don't want to. I want to train tomorrow. I don't want to get hurt. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I want to understand how to roll with you so that I could get better. At the same time, I need you to know that I need to understand how you move. If I don't
Yeah.
understand how you move, I can't defend myself, and you're probably going to hurt me. And that's what I've done over the years. When I grab a guy who's huge, that's much bigger than me, I tell him straight up, I'm like, "Hey man, let's first learn how to train together, and then we can turn up the heat a little bit." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you just grab a big guy and he just does some craziness, then it's gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
So the goal is that you learn that, and then the thing I suggest next is take the worst case scenario and put that big guy there. You know what I mean? Like, what's the
Yeah.
worst case scenario with a Luke Griffith? Like him mounting me. You know what I mean? Him starting in mount or on my back. Like, that's the worst case scenario. I want to start there. Like, let's just go
Right.
right to that. And not, of course, in a match, but if I were in training with him, that's where I would want him to go. I'd be like, "Hey, start there. I want to get out." If I can get out of that, then where else could you put me that makes me uncomfortable?
Yeah.
So I tend to do that a lot. We do a lot of specific rounds. I try to understand that jiu-jitsu is important to learn to train it like other sports train their respected sports. I feel like most jiu-jitsu players don't train jiu-jitsu like as if it was another sport, a soccer or football or basketball or you know baseball or whatever it is, that sport that's out there, that if you're a professional, those professionals, they show up and they do certain things in their sport that makes them better, and they evolve. They don't just show up and scrimmage each other every day. And I think in jiu-jitsu
So
that's all we
true.
do. We just show up and scrimmage every day, and I'm not saying this is what I do, because it's not. um, I don't show up in scrimmage every day, but I know that I need to show up and improve. If I don't improve on certain attributes and certain skills and certain positions and certain defense, certain offense, that you're just gonna stay tough. That's what happens in
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu. A lot of guys just stay tough. They don't get good. They just stay tough. So
That's a mic drop moment. That's very true. It's funny when you think of another sport like like soccer. Think of how many hours soccer players spend doing dribbling, juggling, line drills, small team like 2-on-2, 1-on-1, all these little isolated scenarios where they're improving an aspect of the game. And then you go and you play on the field in the actual match. But that's an instrumental part of skill development. It's an instrumental part of becoming a better soccer player. There is not a day, probably in the last 35 years, that Cristiano Ronaldo hasn't juggled a soccer ball. Yet in the Jiu-Jitsu Academy, I think, and probably because you have a mix of people that want to compete, people that want to do IBA, JJF, they have aspirations of going to ADCC trials. Then you have hobbyists, right? And they're, unfortunately, in some cases, there for a workout, which isn't bad. It's good that they're pursuing their health in some way. But when that's the mixed bag, there's this pressure, I think, sometimes that the leaders in the academy will feel to let people spar
I
because drilling's not fun.
I
But
I,
drilling's the
I agree
best
with
part.
you. I agree 100% with you on that. But I also feel like it's a flawed system. I think most
Mm,
jiu-jitsu guys don't have that mindset. They don't
yeah,
have that thoughts. They don't have the skill sets. They don't think about it. How do most jiu-jitsu instructors become jiu-jitsu instructors? They,
stick around long enough.
they
Yeah,
become the tough guy in the room,
right,
and then they learn a couple. They got 3 or 4 good moves that they have, and then they do some studying on the side, and then their ascensions of teaching jiu-jitsu and teaching classes are what? Show up, warm up, do some drills, get some rolls, go home. That's a class. That doesn't help. That will take you twice as long to get to where you want to be. You will
right.
if you want to get good at jiu-jitsu, that's going to take you. If it's let's say it's 10 years is the mark to get at a black belt. That's what happens. I think the mark at black belt, you see guys reach it in much lesser time. How do they do that? How do they get so good so fast? Well, some of them are doing certain things that maybe they don't even notice that they're doing, but those things are helping them evolve quicker. And I think if we as jiu-jitsu players took the sport and then understood that we can teach it better and we can understand how to make it better by doing certain things in the training for each, even the hobbyist. Like, if
Yeah,
think about what's better than a hobbyist becoming really good. Like, that's it. That's the goal. You want every hobbyist in every gym to get really good, because
right,
if the hobbyists are really good, the professionals are even better.
for sure.
So that's the thing though. It's everybody's focused too much on drilling, but they're not focused on the most important part, which is separating everything that you need to learn and then isolating it and making sure that it's isolated in training. And
You
that's
bring
hard.
up and this I'd like to stick on this for a moment because I think it's a pretty unique perspective because you strike me, and this is proven if you go back and watch any match you've ever been in, you embody a level of toughness, right? So you're a go forward grappler. You're never really on your back foot. Your attack is a bully style that whoever is up against you, they know that they're in for it. Whatever the duration is, they have to be ready to go the full time, or they're in for a super bad day. So you embody this perception of toughness. But you were just saying, like, there's guys that spend all their time just trying to be tough and they don't spend any of their time getting better. So can you maybe unpack a little bit more? How do you balance this toughness, skill development, this attribute that's so important to be good at grappling? You have to be resilient and tough, but investing enough time to where you are advancing the technical side of it, advancing your skill set, and by doing that, making those around you better, which is another really important part of having a successful academy, is that people are lifting each other up just by their skill set. So whether you're a hobbyist or a aspiring professional or professional, how should people manage that toughness and skill development?
Well, you can build toughness and skill sets at the same time, but you can't build skill set if you're not training to build skill set, right? You can
Mm.
build toughness. Toughness is easy. All you gotta do is just keep taking those L's in the gym. You know what I mean? Show up, keep
Right.
showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up, keep getting whooped, keep showing up. You're gonna build. You're gonna become tough
You're
because
going to
you're
become
gonna be like,
tough.
you
Yeah.
know what? I can keep showing up. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
anybody can keep showing up if you just have the mindset for it, right? And some people have the mindset and some don't. But I think being tough isn't enough, though. You know what I mean? It isn't,
Right.
and you can see how you see some guys just appear out of nowhere and they're so good, and you're like, how did this guy get so good so fast? You know, um, and I believe it all has to do with isolating training, like breaking it down much like I said, just like every other sport. Think like soccer. If you let's see what soccer players do, they shoot corners, they
Right.
shoot penalties, they do pass drills, they do certain game strategy things. You know what I mean? And I think you see a lot of gyms now talking about, oh, we should be doing games, right? Games are
Mm.
great. You see a lot of guys doing specific position, just specific position. I think there's a blend of it all in every aspect to get better. And of course, you need to roll. I think rolling should be always a part of it. Of course, you need to roll, but if it's just um, if there isn't enough split of all the things that you need to do, that's when you get stuck at certain levels and you can't jump to that next level. And I I'm I took all this mindset out of off of MMA. When I left in 2017, I fought my last pro fight, and then I took 6 months to focus on that year's ADCC in Finland,
Mm.
and I never went back to MMA because I was like, man, jiu-jitsu is so much easier, and I can make almost the same amount of money doing jiu-jitsu if I fight 3-4 fights a year.
Right.
And then in 2017, I fought 22 professional jiu-jitsu matches, and it wasn't
Stay in shape.
yeah, it wasn't by the lack of like, oh, there was an opportunity. No, there was tremendous opportunity. There was opportunity all the time. I fought sometimes 4 times a month. You know what I mean? Like I flew to 4 different places to fight, and
Yeah.
I was getting paid for those. And it's that's when I was like, all right, like I should be taking this a little more serious, and I should start training differently than what I'm seeing everybody else doing. When I was in
Mm.
MMA, what did I do? I separated my striking from my kickboxing to my boxing, right? Both are different.
Mm.
And then I had to separate my wrestling, and I had to separate creativity in wrestling because I wasn't a wrestler. I wanted to have different looks. I wanted to have a wrestling that blended with jiu-jitsu. And then
Right.
I had to blend all of it, right? And then not every day you came to spar, and I wanted to still do jiu-jitsu. So it was like I had to separate all these little things and then kind of pocket them into learning it. And when I went back to jiu-jitsu to focus just on jiu-jitsu, I was like, man, this is so wrong the way we train. Like,
Yeah.
it's cool to show up and just spar every day, but like, how are we getting better? Like, how am I getting better? So, for a while, I just kept to myself and I just let everybody do what they were doing, and I was doing my own little thing. And I would always like kind of one of the things that kind of really blew my mind was when I got invited to fight in the EBI,
Mm.
and I knew that if I went into overtime, I had to do these specific starts, like on
Right.
the
They do
back.
like the back take, right?
Yeah, the back.
Go and then.
Exactly. On the back and on the arm, right? I
Mm.
knew that if I had to start in either one of those two positions, I had to be really good there. Like I had to know that
Yeah.
I could escape and I could submit people there. And that was the key that I was like, oh, huh. And I got really good at armbar. I got really good at escaping, and I got really good at if you ever notice how a lot of the guys who do EBI events that do really well are usually Eddie Bravo students, 10 Planet
Yeah.
guys. Is that
Yes.
by accident? Do you think that's by
No.
accident?
No, sir.
And it's not because the instructors at their gym are like, oh man, we're EBI guys, we're Eddie Bravo guys, we're 10 Planet guys. We need to be really good at. No, it's because they do that specific overtime round
Right.
because of the event, not because of Eddie Bravo, not because Eddie Bravo told him, like, this is the training format that you need to do.
Right. It
No, he
wasn't
created an
secret
event,
sauce.
and the event had that kickback, and then these guys were like, oh, we need to make sure we do overtime rules. We're doing overtime rules. They're thinking about the rules in the event, but they're not really thinking about how it's isolated positions. Like
Yeah.
Having somebody start on your back and get out is that's hard in itself. You know what I mean? Um,
I always feel like in those rounds too, when you do isolate a position and work, and this might be one of the reasons why people don't like it very much. It's fucking hard.
Terrible,
You are working much
terrible.
harder. Let's say the professor gives you go okay, we're starting, side control top, escape from the bottom, and it's 1 minute per person per position. If you escape, you reset, whatever. That's a anaerobic set. Like you are going as hard as you can to fight for your way out of this position, whether there's stakes on the line or not. And that is not what happens most of the time when you roll. When people roll, they sit, they find a position they're comfortable in, they know their partner. Maybe you get a lapel and a sleeve and you hang out. They try to pass, you move them aside. It's a very like the more you train with people, the more you know how they train. You do this positional stuff, and now it's battle. It's really short term battle to fight your way and use technique out of a position. And it's exhausting. It's hard. You do rounds of that, you're much, much more tired than if you do a couple 5 minute rounds with your training partners that you know. And I
That's
think that's the unfun part about it, and also what makes it so valuable.
that's the professional aspect of it that
Yep.
I'm painting the picture for you. You know, like I
Yep.
said, most guys that get stuck, and we're just talking about two little positions, just two positions in jiu-jitsu that you know clearly that if you start doing all the time, guess what? You get really good, and you get really good. You know, like, hey, if I get to your back and I'm really good there, I'm probably gonna finish you. You know,
Right. And
so
it teaches you not to accept. And I think this is something that I can admit that even in times in training I struggle with is there's and this happens with your training partner when you're training with them, that they accept the position. And in a way it almost ends what you're doing because they're no longer defending it. When you start in these isolated positions, it's constant attempt to either secure it or get the hell out of it. And that's a much different mentality. So then when you actually go to roll and someone gets to your back, you don't go, oh, I'm going to kind of slowly defend the hands and try to work my way out of here. It's instinctual, it's instantaneous because you've been drilling it. So you watch you and Luke in this combat series, the second that you hit the ground, there's zero acceptance. You're not letting him keep you there, you're moving instantaneously. And that is a trained trait that you benefit from isolated training.
that's right. That's exactly you painted the picture. Like I told you, like if I fell in mount with Luke, I would have done the same thing. I would have escaped because I
Yep.
do it all the time in training with guys Luke's size, and if not
Yep.
bigger, and or even maybe even better. You know, so and then that's where you're like, oh, it's tough. No, it's trained. I
Yeah.
if I stop training for a year and come back, everybody in this scene will beat me. But if I
Although
stay,
I think that is an element of toughness though too. Like there's toughness like bravado. I think when people say tough, they think of like some tough guy. Toughness is commitment to the basics, the unfun shit, the
that's
super
right.
hard, non-sexy. That's tough
That's tough.
because that shows up.
That is tough.
Yeah,
That is not easy to do. It's not easy to show up and know you're going to do this specific rounds and you're going to let certain people that probably never get an opportunity ever in a role get to your back, but they're going to start there, and they're going to
yeah,
start to rip your face apart trying to get you. You know, and yeah, you're right. And that's again, I've been focused on that aspect of my training that I'm
hmm
taking my jujitsu career, and that's one of the reasons why I'm continuously doing well, and I'm here at my age still representing and doing the things that I'm doing. I'm taking my training to this level that I am committed to going. All right, there's little pockets that we need to get better in, and everybody needs
yep,
to get better in, and the training revolves around getting better, not just being tough.
yeah,
And you'll see, like you said, it's tough. It's tougher than actually having a fight. You know what I mean? And if we can understand what you're supposed to do, and understand how you're supposed to train, you could take a guy in 3 years and bring him to the best events in the world, and he'll get in. You know what I mean? He'll
yeah.
be one of the guys. It's just a matter of doing the right things.
When you take this timeline, so when I think about this from a strength and conditioning and at the personal trainer's view, you get a call around Thanksgiving, Christmas time, or Christmas time. The fights in the beginning, you did end of January, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think it was a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Super short amount of time to prepare.
Yeah.
And from a strength development side, it's an extremely short amount of time to prepare. From a add 10, 15 pounds of muscle to your body to get ready to fight someone who's bigger than you,
Mm.
extremely small amount of time. So
There's
you
no change.
basically know, right? You basically know when you accept this that you are going to fight him as strong as you are today,
That's right.
because it's not a good time investment for you to go put a bunch of hours in the gym and change your nutrition, jack up your energy system, then have to recondition and cut down or whatever. So the game plan, no matter what, is going to be skill and training based at your current body weight, whatever fluctuations happen between now and then. From an outsider looking in, this is crazy because he's got to be 240, 230, 240. You go
255
into that.
is what he weighed in at. Who's number one? I don't know what he weighed in that day. I didn't even go to the
So
weigh-ins.
probably, I doubt he cut to fight you,
No.
right? So what do you go into that at? 185,
195, 200.
95.
I was between there. Yeah.
So this is a substantial difference, and it's not a substantial difference in a guy who's out of shape and fat. This is a substantial difference in a guy who's extremely athletic, one of the most dominant people in the sport, and very freaking strong. How do you approach that from a mental standpoint? You know that you're going to be weaker than this person in every single facet regarding strength, right? When they grab you, it's just going to be different than when you grab them, and you know that. So how do you approach that? I think this is something that a lot of people can resonate with because they can picture that person in their academy that they know they're going to have to roll with, who's stronger, bigger, or maybe it's different. Maybe it's faster and way more technical. But when you looked at, you knew who Luke was, right? You asked this agent, he didn't. Uh, what's that mental preparation like? What are you expecting when you go into a bout like that?
Like I said, I've had so many hours and experiences training with bigger people, and one of my favorite training partners is Roberto Cyborg Abreu, who's a
Who's
heavy
that? No, I'm
cyborg.
kidding.
Who's been a heavyweight his
Yeah.
whole career,
Yeah.
and
He look.
I've
I mean,
learned.
he looks like he's cut out of a mountainside.
Yeah,
He's a
he's
huge dude.
he's not the tallest guy, right? But he's a gorilla. You know what I mean? He's
Yeah.
like a silverback. That's the
Yeah.
best way to describe him. And I've learned so many attributes and motion things that and a lot of my it's just experience did have a huge work in this match. There was things that I did that the naked eye didn't see. For one big example was I never stopped moving in front of Luke because I didn't want him to be able to grab me and hold me. Um,
Mm.
and I tell this to people who train with bigger people. If you want to do well with a bigger person, know that they were given a God's gift of being big and strong.
Mm-hmm.
If you're smaller than them, your gift was you're weaker and faster. So
Yeah.
just move. Just move. Because the more
And
you
you do.
move,
You are constantly. You're pulling
moving.
him down. You're
I was
pushing your
walking.
side to side.
Yeah, I was never. If you watch the match, there was very little moments that I stopped in front of him. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and I wanted him to follow me and grab me and pursue me and move with me because I knew that would eventually help tire him too.
Yeah.
The more I moved, the more he moved, the better the chances of him getting tired and me seeing an opening. So there was, like I said, there was a lot of factors that I played in the match, but most of it is just confidence in what I've been doing. Consistently
Yeah.
been training. Just being consistent and showing up and doing what you're supposed to do even when there's nothing planned, and
Yeah.
that's how I've made magic in my life. I took opportunities in fights and things that I won like this and things that I lost that I didn't say no to. I didn't when somebody called me. My first instinct in my heart is to say no, this is not for me. I'm good.
Right.
I don't need this in my life. But at the same time, I don't say no. I try never to say no to anything. When somebody comes with me an opportunity, I'm always kind of like, all right, give me 24 hours to think about this. Let me think about this. Let me
Right.
really see where this is at, and that's it. I just knew that I'm consistently on the mat, every day as much as I can be, whether I'm teaching or I'm training or I'm showing stuff. I'm just being involved I knew that I was physically prepared and I was mentally prepared, and the opportunity would be, a big challenge. So it was just a lot of little things that go on. I think, a lot of guys are always like, no, I need, I have a training partner that was asked to be on the same card to face one of the other guys that was on the card. I'm not gonna say whether it was a male or female, but they were like, oh, I need like, I need 2 months to get ready for this. Like, what do you need 2 months for if you've been training? You know,
Right.
I don't need 2 months. I need to be training, and if you call me, I need 3 days. That's what I need. To get from where I am to where you are.
The benefit of always being ready. But I mean, that's even like a life preparation thing, right? Like you want to be preparedness is just in general a really valuable concept for whatever happens, right? You want to be
Right.
prepared all the time, and especially, I mean, it is not my career, but in a sport, like granted, it's not getting punched in the face or choked out, so it's different. But think about any other sport, right? They're playing 162 games a year. They don't call LeBron and say, "Hey, you good to play the Spurs on Saturday?" And he goes, "I don't know, man.
Funny you say this.
I've, you know,
It made me think of a basketball player as well, like Michael Jordan.
yeah,
Michael Jordan
yeah,
didn't. He played every day he could. He didn't, say, oh, I don't want to play this team here, because I already beat them and I don't want to play them. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. I think in jiu-jitsu we have this, and it's so ugly. I think I hear this. I hear it all the time with other jiu-jitsu athletes that they get called this opportunity, like, who's number one wants you to face this person, and then they're like, yeah, that's not for me. They never really won anything, and they're a purple belt, or they're a blue belt. Like, for example, like my son, and I know this young lady Helena. Like,
yeah,
why would an adult want to face, these children? You know what I mean? Like, why would I
right,
want to face them? Well, they're purple belts and blue belts. Like, there's no makes no sense to face them. Yes, it does. This is the next generation that's going to take the game by storm. Either you take them now, or you say no, and you lose this huge opportunity for you. You know what I mean? Like,
right,
I don't get it, and I know in other sports they don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, if the Bulls had to play the Spurs and the Spurs were terrible, the Bulls were going to show up and beat the Spurs whatever way they
right.
wanted. You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
just
I think that there's a mentality aspect to this that I think in fight sports you don't have the luxury of not embodying that mindset because you, for example, are you still 41 or you turned 42?
turned 42 this year.
Okay, so 41 years old, right? You get the offer to go and fight Luke. Maybe initial feelings are like, I don't know, does this make sense for me? Ultimately, you do it though, right? And that's what matters.
Yeah,
Ultimately, you do it. That is a neurological pathway thing. That's the way that you look at the world is yes, I will do this. I will overcome that. I will take on this challenge. I will train with this person to make this happen. If you've chosen to be in the world of combat sports, whether it's jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, striking, kickboxing, whatever, MMA, if there's an ounce of mentality that is, I don't know, or I need more time, if that's just how you are and you don't kick that in the ass and change, there is going to be a point in the career where you are forced to say yes to something you don't want to. And then all those years of fear and anxiety and whatever you built up around that, they're going to show up and you're going to get your ass kicked.
that's true.
And this happens all the time because fight sports is not basketball. It is not baseball. And it is something where you're going to get a call a month out. You want this or not? If you don't want it, we're going to give the opportunity to someone else. And now look, you're coming out on the win on the launch of a new type of event. So obviously now you're in the roster of yes men that they can go to and say, hey, we can count on Vagner to show up 3 weeks out and put on an epic show that bring people here. That's an opportunity and future opportunities that would have been kept away from you if you had a different mentality. And if everyone were to embody that, then fight sports is more exciting. Because as a fan, how cool is it to watch someone who you know took on a challenge that they might not have been totally ready for and come out victorious? That is the ethos of fight sports. That's what makes it so badass. Is that actually happens. Your event happened. That was sick, right? And we
Yeah.
don't get that all the time.
No,
So I think that again, I say this from the comfort of my house, and I'm not a professional athlete in combat sports, but I always appreciate people that are willing to say yes, and you see them rewarded for it constantly.
Yeah, it's a very very unique um, characteristic to have, and it's like you said. There's that thing in your mind that you need to turn on, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have that, you know. And I'd be truthful with you. I don't think I would be who I am if I didn't have this in me. Like
Mm-hmm.
all the most life changing opportunities I had were because I said yes. It didn't necessarily mean I won all of them, but there's a couple in particular in my mind. Like my first UFC fight was against Cowboy Cerrone, who
Mm-hmm.
today everybody in MMA knows what Cowboy Cerrone is, you know.
Yep.
And they called me on 7 days notice, and they were like, "Hey, you know, I was 7-0 professional. They're like, you want to come fight Cowboy in Vancouver in a week from now?" And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I remember I was on the phone with Joe Silva, who was the matchmaker for the UFC back then, who was legendary. And he's like, "Why you?" And I'm like, "Because how many people have you got on the phone that said no to you?"
Right.
And he was like, "A lot." I said, "That's why. That's
Yeah.
why me." And he was like, "I'll see you in
Deal.
Vancouver."
So this is actually an interesting point to bring up. So that didn't go your way, right? That was
No, I
ended up
didn't go my way. I
reflecting a
lost the
lot.
match. I
Right.
lost the fight.
So
I
how do you talk me through that part of the mindset? Because this is an important. This is another opportunity where people crack, right? They go, "I didn't want to do that. I did it anyway. I'm a fucking idiot. I shouldn't have done that. I've destroyed my career." And then all the critics are saying, He shouldn't have taken that fight. He didn't have a full camp. That's why whatever." So how do you stay on track? Because then you did, right? You go on. You have a continued MMA career. Your grappling career, obviously, everyone knows about. Uh, that could have been a moment, right, in your career where you get crushed by having a bad mentality and bad mental strength about it, but you didn't. So what happens there following that loss?
I did everything that I needed to do. That those losses, and I can name you a one after that that helped me change another part of my life. You know what I mean? Like those kind of losses, they can either break your mind, right? If you fall apart in your pride, if you fall apart in your, oh man, it's about me. No, it's not
Right.
about you. It's about what you don't know and what you don't do and what you need to do and where you need to go to get where you want to be, right? And that's I took me out of the equation, and I looked at myself as if I was a coach, if I was my own coach, like if I had my own coach looking at me, like
Mm-hmm.
if I had a general looking at me and going, yeah, you're faulting here and here and here and here. So I assessed where I was weak, and I literally, like within a week or two, I found two new coaches to help me with things that I didn't do well. That I was like, man, I need to do this better. This is what I didn't do there that I need to do now. You know, for example, I went into that fight with close to zero striking to fight
Sweet.
one of the best strikers of all time in the UFC.
Yeah.
I fought him for 3 rounds in the fight where he did not want to have anything to do with the ground, and I managed to get him down at least once.
Yeah.
And he leg kicked me 57 times. It was a record in the UFC back then.
Jeez. How'd your leg
I
feel?
walked off the fight. Like I didn't get TKO'd. I didn't
Yeah.
get I that was when you say, yeah, that's tough. I got kicked 57 times in the leg, and I walked out of the fight and I said, "Oh, I need to learn how to check leg kicks."
You
I
think? Right.
didn't walk out of the fight going, "Oh man, I suck. He embarrassed me. He beat me up."
Yeah.
Everybody I know who's watching me. There's my pride talking, right? And this was me looking at me in a different way. Like, no, no, no. I need to learn. My striking needs work. I need to move my feet better. I need to learn how to defend kicks, and I need to better my wrestling because I need to have a better like. I was just so good at just grabbing people and then just dragging them to the ground, no matter which way I grabbed them, that I could submit them. And
Right.
I knew after that moment that I was like, no, I need to better these things. Like I need to make sure that these things. And that's when my wrestling got better and my striking got better, and I learned how to defend leg kicks. And I went on even to win fights later on in my record via leg kicks because of how good I got at defending and attacking. You know, so it's like it's a matter of you just taking your pride and putting it aside and saying, all right, look at you in a third person. What is it that you should assess yourself to become
Right.
better, you know? So, and like I said, there were so many opportunities that I've had that they've happened exactly like that, that I was like, all right, this is what I need to do. And those things just should make you better. They shouldn't break you. They should elevate you.
Yeah, Jasmine and I had a good conversation about the mental training that she does with her. I forget his name. I think
Sam.
it's something. She kept saying something. The man, Stan the man, Stan the man,
Sam, it's Sam.
Sam. That she works with this mental coach, and I did that when I was younger, competing in skiing, and it was like X factor, man. I mean, to be able to offload some of the stresses and life things to a professional and someone who can see things clearly, and then help you get back on track for the sport that you love, for what you're competing in, and just like centralize your energy. It was I mean, it was a game changing experience for me, instrumental in my clarity. And she had such good insights about that. And I know when you take a loss as an athlete, you have a fork in the road and you get to choose. Are you going to handle this constructively and get better? Or are you going to handle this with ego and get defeated and then start thinking that you're not worth it and you can't make it happen? Have you ever gone outside of just like who you are as a person and your development and worked with people kind of like that, where they're helping you stay on track mentally or work through things mentally? Or is this just kind of your birth to mentality, and you've always had that?
Um, I like to say that I had a little bit of it, but I feel like this was inbred in him at home. My dad was a very, still a very, very strong minded individual, a very, very unique. My dad's like one of the most unique people I've ever met in my life, and his mindset is something to be like admired and maybe even studied. And I feel like I'm like 10% of who he is, like on my work ethic, on my
Mm-hmm.
person, and I had to tone that down because I was more to an extreme where I was so hard on others around me because I felt like they were doing what they could do or they could push themselves. I would push
Mm-hmm.
people away and I would break their mind and I would just start talking to them and I would point out the things. I'm like, what are you doing? Look at you, like, and
Right.
I had to learn how to tone that down, because that was what I was raised with. That's who my dad was next to me doing. So like everything I did with my dad was a competition. Everything we did was, if we were walking home, we would start running home. If we
Right.
were, yeah, weird,
Yeah.
right? If we were outside, sweeping the floor, we would kind of be looking at like, how much are you sweeping? How much is he sweeping? How much am I sweeping? Should I sweep more? You know what I mean? Like, it's always, and it was like this ability to always kind of assess yourself and challenge, to be challenged and then challenge again.
Right.
So I have worked with Sam, who Jasmine works with too.
Yeah.
And when we worked, he told me, he goes, man, the things that I have for you are different than what I would have for regular people because
Right.
for me, it isn't necessarily the mindset of being able to train more or do this or focus on getting ready or, get engaged in the match. And for me, it was more pre-planning the things that I need to do. You know what I mean? And I feel like that ability to be able to plan all the little things that are going to happen days out or the day of, those are the things that I lack, that I thought was helpful when I did work with him. And again, it is part of your mental, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
those things, because you didn't plan something, it can kind of turn, so everything else can turn another way, you know what I mean, your mind can start focusing on the things that you shouldn't be focusing on, so um
How do you manage that with as a father? Like, I can imagine that this is a personality trait that, if yeah, I guess you alluded to it a little bit earlier. Like, if it's unchecked, it can be really abrasive.
oh, it's
Right? If you're
horrible.
growing up and you're a child and you're enjoying sports that you're doing, or you're enjoying endeavors that you're doing, they're exciting. You're naturally motivated to do them, and then you have a parent who's supportive of that. That's incredible. there's a fine line in parenting between being supportive and then being overbearing. And I just know from the sports I've done, I've seen the the horrible and really tragically sad side of that, where parents want it more than their kids, kind of thing,
Yeah.
and it destroys athletes with incredible potential, right? So here you are, an extremely accomplished grappler, mixed martial artist, someone who's got internal tenacity that's of different levels, right? How do you, and it appears to be going pretty well from social media, but that's only one side of the coin. You never know what's going on inside someone's home. Um, but you guys come off as a unit, a family that supports each other on all aspects, right? Whether it's your training together, supporting each other at tournaments, everyone seems happy. Is is that what's really going on? How do you and your wife keep things serious, but also keep things fun and exciting so that both your children are pursuing this as much as you want them to, but also for themselves, that they're excited about this. They want to keep it going and they're passionate about it.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I attribute to this. One, I started jiu-jitsu in a gym where um, it was a father and a son duel. The father was a black belt, like a third degree black belt, and the son had just gotten his black belt, and there, the young man who's the son of the instructor. I don't want to name him. I don't want to drop his name, but
Fair.
people know me know where I got my black belt from. So it's this family. And,
Amazon.
um, they had a weird relationship where his dad was very, very aggressive with him on the mat. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember being a white belt and watching this young man train. And when I say young man, he's older than I am now.
Yeah.
But he was young then. He was like 19 at the time. And he was training, and his dad would like sit and criticize him and just tear him apart. And he was like the most amazing jiu-jitsu athlete I've ever seen in my life. One of the most toughest roles I've ever seen anybody in any mat I've ever been on. Like this guy is in my top 3 of best guy ever in the world
Wow.
in training,
Yeah.
in training. But he was a head case in competition,
Yeah.
and I feel like his head case in competition had a lot to do with what his dad did to him in training. His dad would, you know, pick him apart, and he never praised him. He never gave him, insight. He just bashed on him.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of people believe that helps, like, oh, I'm going to make you tougher. I'm going to pick on you. I'm going to break you. I'm going to make you tougher. Like military type style,
Right.
things. And it didn't do well with him. And when I watched him compete, I could tell he was never, more than 10% of who he really was in the training room.
So sad, man.
Yeah. So, and this is a guy we're talking that became an ADCC champion,
Yeah.
like, was like one of the best guys ever in the world. And a guy who people don't even know and talk of. You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
just the way he competed, it wasn't appealing because of the way he was. So I watched this and I remember thinking to myself, "Huh, when I have kids, I'm never gonna do that to my kids." Like it was weird. I remember thinking that, like, I'm never gonna do that to my kids. I'm not gonna. If my kids do jujitsu, I'm just gonna be happy that they do jujitsu. You know what I mean? Like that, I'm just gonna
Right.
be thrilled with that. And my wife was a huge another part of this because we're complete opposites. My personality is one way and hers is the other way, and she was always kind of around me, talking to me and checking me and kind of directing my mind to doing the right things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when my kids started to train, one of the things that we alluded to was that jiu-jitsu wasn't just a sport. Jiu-jitsu is a life skill, and our kids, they need to learn how to defend themselves. Like
Yeah.
this is not something we can negotiate in the house. You know what I mean? Like it's not negotiable. You gotta do jujitsu. You don't have to be good, but you
Right.
gotta know how to defend yourself. You know what I mean? Like the person who's out in the street most likely is not gonna know jujitsu. So even if you're the worst kid in our gym, you're still better than that kid. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was never a negotiable thing, but because I always felt competition, it was an important piece for children to get better at jiu-jitsu. I always preach that in the gym to parents. I said,
Yeah.
hey, competition is like scrimmage in other sports. If your kid is willing to go compete, they're probably going to test themselves and they're going to get better because of that.
Yeah.
And I said the kids need to want to go do that themselves. If the parents are putting the pressure on it, it's probably not going to be good.
Right.
So I always made it a point that I, as an instructor, would press the idea of competition, and the parents would ask their kids, like, "Hey, you want to do competition?" "Yes, I do." "Cool, take them." And that was the game plan for all the parents and kids in my gym, and it still is till this day. And as I did that, my children were, of course, on the mat with the same kids, and they were like, "Hey, can I compete too?" And I'm like, "Of course you can." And I would take them, and they would lose because they were
Yeah.
terrible. And I never ever pressed them about how much they trained or what they did. I just made sure that they showed up. And with time, they just started loving it. They started like after so many years of doing it over and over again, they realized like, you know what? I'm kind of actually good at this. I'm not that bad. You know what I mean? And like anything you do for a long period of time in the right place with the right people, you're going to get good. So that's genuinely how they grew to love it, and we do have a great relationship, with them. And I try to explain to them a lot, like as of now that they've become professionals, because I feel like they're
Mm-hmm.
at that level where they've made money doing jiu-jitsu, that I can be their dad, I can be their coach, or I can be their boss. You know what I mean? And they
Mm-hmm.
need to know that if they're in the gym teaching classes, that I'm going to be their boss and I'm going to tell them how it is and this is how it should be.
Right.
And when they're on the mat and they ask me for advice, that now I am their coach. And I say it. When I see that they're getting frustrated with me, I say, as your coach,
Right.
as a person who is looking to help you become better, try to
Right.
understand what I'm saying. What you're doing here is wrong. It's not how you're supposed to do it. And that usually kind of resonates with them. And I also say them to things to them like, hey, as your dad, who loves you and wants the best for you, you need to focus in this direction, you know. So it's a battle, especially for raising kids who do jujitsu and are taking it as their career. I'm extremely blessed with this. I feel like if you look at the world, how many high level athletes do you know that have high level children on the mat as
Well,
well?
you just got to compete with
Achilles.
Adonis. I mean, how I saw that, and I've especially now a great relationship with my dad, and we talk about health and fitness all the time. It's a big part of that. He lives too far away from me, but that connection is really important. It's special. And so when you see, it was just like, who was it in Bellator? The father son duo. They both fought on the same card. Totally drawing a blank right now. But when you see that happen, that's a very unique, special thing. A lot of things have to align for that to come to fruition. If it's Adonis, right?
No, Achilles.
Achilles. Sorry,
Okay.
Achilles. Uh, Achilles, like if he was bad at jujitsu or did it but didn't care about it, that never happens, right?
Right.
If you guys don't have a relationship around jujitsu, that never happens. If the fight promotions weren't interested in you and your career, and then also this storyline, that never happens. So to get you both on the same card it's a stars align kind of situation. What was that like for you competing alongside your son for the first time on
Um,
that stage?
it was actually probably one of the harder things I've done in my life.
Really,
I felt well. It was a lot of things. The young man that he fought, Andy Varela, is
bro?
yeah, exactly. He's really good,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's one of the best, in the world right now. Like
yeah.
pushing forward, like one of these young
Yes,
stars that are trying to break through and put his name on the map the way and he is. He's to me he's in the top 10 in the world for sure.
would
And
totally second that.
yeah, and then we came from here from Florida to Vegas. We fought him in Las Vegas in his home city in
Right,
his backyard. Achilles and I got sick the week of, and we showed up, and I started thinking like, man, this is going to be a bad weekend. Like we're going to go there, like how's he gonna do? I started getting nervous for him because like
right.
I know I've been on these stages. I've been on these big lights, cameras in your face, people asking you questions,
It's
interviews.
different, dude.
All these
It's
things start
different.
happening, and you
Yeah.
start to realize how this is something different. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I started to get nervous for him. And then when he won, I started getting nervous for me. I was like, oh, now he won.
I gotta bet
Now
this.
I have to win. Like
Yeah.
this only settles the night if I win too. You know. So yeah, it was it's such a dream come true. My ultimate dream is having me, Achilles, and Jasmine all in one huge event. Preferably maybe an ADCC event, like an ADCC Worlds. You know, that's the that's one of
You know
those
what's
things.
cool about that is not a curated thing. That's an earned thing. So if
Yeah,
you all three end up on a card like that, you all did it by your individual efforts. And that's of that doubles down on the how special something like that would be. That's not like a hey, so and so, let's do me a favor. It's been a dream of mine to be on a card with my kids. Not in that arena. No one's pulling that string for anybody. So you
nobody's
guys get
gonna get
there.
that. Nobody's gonna get in on that show unless you deserve to be there, and that's what
Are
I'm.
you doing ADCC 2024?
Yes, sir.
Hell yeah.
And Jasmine and Achilles are already signed up for the trials in Brazil, and hopefully they get it done there. And then if they don't get it done there, we're gonna go to the trials in Las Vegas, and we're gonna get it done some way somehow. And I honestly I believe in more than ever that they were both so ready for these opportunities that I can't see how they won't make it. You know,
And
both.
you have the invite from before, right? So you don't have to requalify.
No,
How are you? I mean, you got to, dude, you have to feel incredible after this combat event, right? I mean, you basically just had a finals match, an open weight finals match in a slightly different rule set, but still. Uh, how do you feel about ADCC coming off of this?
I feel great. I've never felt better than I have this year.
Mhm.
All the stars are aligning. All my like I said, I've spent the last 6 years of my life. I've been at the top of the food chain in the ADCC events in the ADCC World event for the last 8 years. So basically, 2017, I was in the semifinals. I lost a referee's decision to the finalist
Mhm.
and got third in that year, beat Gary Tonin, who's another amazing athlete.
Yeah.
And then in 2019, I got to the finals against JT Torres, and I lost there, and I got a silver medal. And then in this last one, I lost in the semifinals to Barbosa, who was exhausted and went to the finals to fight Bodoni, and he had nothing left because I took everything out of him in the semi match, and I won. I got a third place match there, and I got a third
Yep.
place medal. So the last three ADCCs, I've been on the podium, which is already kind of, if you look at it, find three, find another athlete just like me who's at my age who's been on the podium the last three ADCCs. You won't find one, and and I feel like I've gotten better since then. I've gotten better since 2 years ago, and I'm just excited. Excited. I really am excited to see them make it,
Yeah.
and I think that would put the cherry on top if I went there and won. You know what I mean? Like if I won the tournament and one of them, were to be there with me, this is just be incredible. I think it's history that will never be matched again. I don't think anybody will ever be able to do it.
Super tough to get that
Yeah, because
done.
it's the age that I'm at and the age that they're at,
Yeah.
and the level of our jiu-jitsu that is very hard to rival. You know what I mean? So I can't see anybody ever being able to repeat that.
Well, and I mean, for being honest, this is going to be the most dynamic, challenging, difficult year of ADCC ever because it's the most publicized. The opens are the biggest they've ever been. They're selling out every single trial. So you're not getting just the who's who of the sport. You're getting the who's who of the sport and all the people you don't know that are nasty as hell. And they're all competing for a spot. So like 2022 was sick as a viewer. It was epic. It was the coolest grappling event to watch. Now you're going to get that on crack. I mean, it's going to be it is going to be such a sick tournament if so that's even more belt notch in the belt if they make it because they're also not competing against an okay field. They're competing against the best the field's ever been, undoubtedly,
It's true.
right? So it's going to be a hell of an event. I'm curious. So after doing the combat event, this pit is a very unique setup,
Hmm.
and it has these angled walls on the side,
I liked it.
unlike if you're doing a grappling in a cage or the open in ADCC, where you have the ability to keep driving through your opponent and then end up even fighting out of bounds. Overall, what do you think? I kind of loved it.
I did. I enjoyed it. There was a couple things about it that I enjoyed that were better than any other ring I've ever been on. One, the tarp that they had on the mat. It was so good. It was like,
Like the top, you mean like
yeah,
the
it was
mat top?
something like
Yeah.
a blend of the UFC's canvas,
Hmm.
minus the burning, because the UFC canvas burns you all up. You get like
Yeah.
you stick to the ground, but you burn like hell. You like
Yeah.
you're all roughed up when it all ends. Um, this had that same feel, but it didn't burn me at all, and the ability to be able to not have the match stop ever. There was never a moment where we
Yeah.
stopped fighting. There
Yeah.
wasn't a match for us to stop, for him to breathe, for me to regain, for us to kind of like get settled in the middle again. There was no stop in the action, and that I thought
Right.
was priceless.
So when I was watching it, that was actually something I thought about, this energy asymmetry that you started to see between you and Luke in the bout, is that, well, you had neither of you had fought in that setting before, but your style is never stop. I can go all day long, and if anything, maintain a high output and then still find this uh, sick gas pedal at the end, right? So it actually plays to that kind of structure. Whereas if you're used to winning rounds in the first couple of minutes or bullying people out and getting that, you get 10 seconds to reset every time, 8 times. That's 80 seconds, right? Like you have now taken more than a minute over the cumulative effect of the round to recover. And you see it in these matches all the time. People strut back to the middle, right? They're taking their time and then they slap hands and go again. So this constant nature of never being able to stop. And then if you do bully or rush, you hit the wall and you actually like almost slide or bounce back into the mat. Was there anything about that angled wall that was odd for grappling, or that you felt like wouldn't really lend itself to excitement or like the sport being good in that setting?
I think that arena in itself was a really good setup. I think if that ring was a little bit bigger and the angles were a little further out,
Mhm.
that would be the perfect stage for grappling.
So like a little bit wider total area,
Yeah.
and then the same angle on the side.
Yeah, because then you're forced. If you're gonna end up on those corners, that's because you're being lazy. You need to circle. You need to move. I mean, I found myself circling 3 or 4 good times in that round where I was like, man, I cannot allow him to push me into this wall. If he falls on me, this is not good against this edge too, you know. So yeah, I can't see how it wouldn't be, how it wouldn't fit for jiu-jitsu, you know.
You know what was obnoxious to me, if I'm just going to be honest about this? The announcing
Ugh,
panel. So they had that Mike guy. I don't know what he's. I don't know why people know him, but he's on somebody else's show,
I think he
and
was.
he was
Gilly,
one third of the announcing.
Gilly said he was part of one of the Paul's brothers'
Is that, yeah? Okay.
friends.
So there is a general, like, I get it if you don't understand like a sport, and there's some degree of like curiosity could actually play into the color commentating, because you could be the everyman who doesn't really get it, and you could be learning from the other. Not like you could purposely do that. You go, okay, we have a panel of three, two experts, one person doesn't really know. Why don't you guys kind of educate each other as you're commentating this, so that the viewer who doesn't really understand can participate in that?
Yeah,
The announcing was so bad, man. It was almost like they didn't know that a grappling event was going to happen, and they thought that a Muay Thai fight was going to happen. So everything they're talking about is very like, oh, they're on the ground again, or oh, I'm like, why invest the
Josh.
money
I
in
think there was
bringing?
Josh Palmer.
He knew what was right.
He's
He was
also a
great,
very very great, one of the great jiu-jitsu commentators in the world. I think
phenomenal.
this guy's one of the top 3 in the world in my opinion. You know.
And Boz was hilarious because
Yeah.
he knows what's going on.
Yeah.
But something about that, I'm like, if you want this to be a thing, like you really got to elevate the commentary because you have to assume that the person watching doesn't get it, and they were not helping. I got it because I do this every day of the week. But the other people, I'm like, how do you drop the ball on that? It was almost disrespectful, in my opinion. I don't know. Could you hear that when you were in there?
No, I couldn't hear anything. When you're in the match, my focus is ultra focused on
Yeah,
never taking my eyes off the guy in front of me and possibly hearing the people who were trying to assist me on the outside. So
right.
yeah, my focus was completely on them. I only know it was bad because I watched the match again and I was like, oh, this guy's
Like, what are you guys doing?
yeah.
Well, what do you think is between these now? Like, let's assume that this continues on. You've been grappling for so long, you know the ins and outs of the sport better than anybody. Which of these rule sets do you feel like highlights jujitsu the best, makes it the most viewer exciting experience, and has the most potential to continue to grow the sport, bring people into the fold, get people excited about it while they watch their, favorite grapplers go at it?
Um, it's hard. I don't think any of them really have that right now. I think
Hmm.
ADCC is the coolest one for the spectator that knows jujitsu because
Yeah.
you can get behind that. You understand what's happening. But for a person who is, for your grandma who's gonna sit on the couch with you and watch it with you, it's not gonna be, or even your grandfather, it's not gonna be. That's gonna be hard for them. It's hard to really put a finger on what rule set is the best. I think, for the people who know jujitsu, I think ADCC is, you know, more exciting and probably the best one. But for a spectator base that doesn't know what they're watching, all of jujitsu is hard to understand. And I feel like, for if you had your grandfather on the couch and he was watching it with you, I don't think he would be excited about ADCC. You know, um, so because it's hard to understand how they score, and it's hard to understand how to score even for the jiu-jitsu players. So
Right.
I think the format that makes sense, that is exciting for people, is always what has worked in every other sport, which is a team format where you can put a
Mm,
team together of people, and you have people maybe that on that team, or that team represents something to you. Represents
right.
maybe a place you're from, or a country, or whatever the case may be. I think that's the way that jiu-jitsu could probably take that next level of growth.
That's actually a really, really interesting point. It kind of reminds me of the AIGA promotion that's going on right now. It's kind of cool because you do have some of that, like, it's almost like nationalism, right? Like you want the American dudes to do well because they're the American dudes. So you can, if you're new to it, you can get behind your country to watch it, or kind of like your favorite grappler and then the other people that are on his
Isn't
team
that why
in
most
hopes that
people watch the World Cup? Like, why do people watch the World Cup?
exactly
Nobody really watches soccer. I mean,
right,
but people watch the World Cup. You know what I mean? They know because it's every 4 years. It's about country. It's about pride in where you're from. It's
right,
for the main reason why most people love their sports in whatever representative states they're in. You know,
yeah.
people, the Patriots, or the Chicago Bulls, or whatever place you're from, that you see your team. I think that's where I think jiu-jitsu could take that leap to bigger sponsors, and actually a platform that people may understand better.
Yeah. Do you value gi training in any capacity at this point in your career?
Yeah, I think it has a place. I think jiu-jitsu is different in the gi. It's slower. I think
Mhm.
if you are an athlete that relies much on scrambling and movement, I think training in the gi could be very beneficial to you, so you can learn how to slow down the game. You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's
if you are looking to become a professional, then you have to focus on what you're doing. And if
yeah, I'm
you can
curious. I know
understand
your
your time.
opinions about IBJJF from the last time that we talked, but I'm really curious about what happens over the next decade with these organizations, if there's like a conglomerization or if some of them fall out, just because as difficult as jiu-jitsu is to understand when you're watching, like you said, you're watching ADCC with your grandma, the gi just makes it twice as difficult to understand
Yes,
because there's so many advantages and little nuances that make sense if you participate that you don't pick up on at all when you're watching two people go. And there's so much more stalling by nature of the grips. Like it's just a slower, more technical evolution between two people. And I think that that's problematic. I think there's a philosophical side to martial arts where the jujitsu is the gi is very like anchored into that, and there's history there, and there's the belt system. But as far as growth, like I really don't see how you effectively remarket and grow that side of it in a sports setting.
I think it's a dying creature. You know,
Yeah.
it's a dying creature that's not dying fast, but it's a fruit. It's a tree that bears no fruit. So it's what happens with the tree that bears no fruit. It eventually gets chopped down. If you got
Yeah.
you need that
Well, and
space.
it kind of takes the belts, like I don't know. This is my perspective on it. It kind of takes the belt system and it lifts the curtain on it a little bit because you'll see someone who's like a blue belt, right? But then they go and they smash the hell out of like some brown belt in a no-gi setting because you realize like there's a lot of playing that you have to do when you're playing in the gi, and when you take the playing out of it,
You mean
it brings
stalling?
back in
Do
at
you mean stalling, holding? It's
yeah.
not really jujitsu.
Right. Like if you're just better at grips than me, then you're going to be better at gi jiu-jitsu, but that doesn't make you necessarily better at jiu-jitsu as
It's
a
true.
whole.
It's 100% true.
Like you take the gi off, it equalizes some people. You put it on and it creates a vastness of skill difference. So I
I don't know
wonder
if I
just
don't think vastness of skill level is the right words though. I don't think there is. I don't think it's huge, huge vastness. I think it's much smaller than you think.
between gi and no gi.
I think if you got a guy if you get a blue belt that's athletic and you get a
Mm-hmm.
brown belt that's good, and you put him in nogi and the blue belt gets the better of him, I think the other way around, the brown belt versus the blue belt, I don't think it's a huge, huge leap
Mm.
of difference.
You mean you think so? You put him back in the gi, you feel like it would actually be
Closer.
closer. Hmm. So athleticism and well, you have to have skill prerequisites, but athleticism and aggression play a bigger role, maybe.
Yeah, that's why you don't see um, so many great jiu-jitsu athletes making their way into MMA and doing well. It just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, it's true. It's really the Nogi guys. It's going to be so interesting. I mean, ADCC 2024 is going to be sick. It's going to be an epic spectacle of the sport, and it's really going to be telling us to the direction that it can go from there. It's going to be freaking wild, man. If it's all three of you guys in the show together,
That's the goal. That's
yeah,
the
fingers
that's
crossed.
been our goal for the last 4 years, and I've been helping them get prepared for it. And I have never seen them at this level right now that they are. All
Yeah.
my children, and God willing, they show up and they showcase how good they are, and they get it done. I think both Jasmine and Achilles have the skills to win a trials and an ability to be there with me. So
Well, that'll be epic, Wagner. It'll be really cool to watch. So I'll touch on one last subject here. Uh, PEDs, steroids. It was a big topic in our first one. Uh, I love reading YouTube comments about you and Reddit comments. I don't think that you probably spend very much time
no, I
doing that,
don't.
but the Luke Griffith match, people seem to really think that it was 100% clean off cycle, nothing match. So I'm curious, where are you at with testosterone replacement therapy? Is that something you're still doing?
I
How does that play
I'm
into your sport?
consistently. I live my system. I live through my doctor's prescriptions, and I do what I do.
Yeah.
I don't look like a bodybuilder. You could see me that day without a shirt on. I clearly don't
Right.
look like a guy who's, you know, juicing and looking crazy. You know what I mean? But I am on TRT. It's like a low dosage that I maintain throughout the year. It's just the way I am. So I don't. People think that 90% of the jiu-jitsu community doesn't understand that most of everybody's on something. On
Right.
something.
Especially on the let's be clear, especially in an unregulated promotion on a professional level where you have to risk a ton to barely make a living.
Yep, it's most people are on something. For me, it's not even about being on it to be a competitor. For me, it's just to have a good living. Like
Yeah.
I love having good energy, having my mind clear, being able to wake up, feel good, train. Like to me, that's not even about what I do to get myself to where I get myself. That's a whole nother thing. It has nothing one to do with the other. But you know, the internet is funny though, right? I'm sure
It's so stupid, man. I will put up. I actually stopped doing this because it was so stupid. I would often go to Reddit and say, "Hey, I'm about to host someone on the podcast. Any questions?" And I mean that genuinely. Like, hey, here's an opportunity to submit a question to someone who you might look up to, who you've watched their whole career, and you want to know something. Maybe questions like I think I would want to ask someone like I do. Always, you're always only hit with the worst of the worst, the most aggressive, most negative shit ever,
yeah.
all from behind the comfort, right? And the reason I ask about the TRT stuff is actually since we last talked, I've had many kind of older athletes from the academy ask me about that because they're feeling this like they've been a black belt for a while or they just got it and they're in their 40s, kind of maybe more mid late 40s, and they're feeling the fact that hey, physiologically shit changes when you get older. That's what happens in life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that 25-year-old self who could wake up hungover and go train 16 hours in a day is not that's not the same anymore. And so they were asking about uh, what the differences are, if it's something that they should ask their doctor about, that kind of thing. And I thought of you because I felt like your answers were very transparent and honest, as they just were again. Uh, and it kind of challenges I think the perception of the way people think about steroids, that they allow people to become superhuman. They allow people to beat whoever they want. It allows recovery to happen at a different level, right? And so you can therefore push yourself more. But how much of a game changer is that for you, just on your ability to train the way you want to train now, while you're still, going out there and competing against young guys who are some of the best in the world? Is it an instrumental part? Is it is something that you could do without, or is it a staple that really stays in your life and allows you to do all these things? And what do you say to another male in their mid late 40s who are starting to feel the wear but still want to train and push themselves and show up every day?
For me, it's back to the beginning of today's interview. Training smarter, not harder, and
Yeah.
and finding what is right for you. If some people that are my age, I have a friend training partner that he's a couple years older than me, and he gets his blood work done, and he's like, man, my testosterone's in the 700s. I'm like, good for you. Like, and
Damn,
he's
I'm
like,
jealous.
he adamantly says, I swear, Wagner, I'm clean, and I believe him. But
Yeah.
in each to each his own. You know what I mean? If your testosterone's in the hundreds, low hundreds, it's not good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think each person should know where their body is, like your car. You know what I mean? You don't just drive your car over and over and over again and not change the oil or not get it checked up for a tune up, or you need to take care of your car so that you can have your car forever. And
Yeah.
that's what I think our bodies are even more important than our cars. That we need to make sure that we're checking, we're making sure that everything's right, that what you eat, what you drink, what you do, your habits of what, those are the things too. People would talk about testosterone, but they're talk about the habits that you have. You know what I mean? Do you drink?
Yeah.
What do you eat? How do you sleep? How often do you sleep? How much do you, you eat the right things? How much vitamins? Like, talk about all the things. Like, oh, I am, to me, I am like an old person. I am very, very, um, I don't know if old person is the right word, but I'm very, very easy to find. If you know who I am, you know exactly where I'll be every hour of every week.
Right.
Like, you know where I'll be at this time, you'll know where I'll be at that time. Like, my schedule doesn't change. I don't go out, I don't party, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I eat, I train, I do my, my stuff that I need to do, my work, my job, and I live my life and I'm happy. And that's what I think most people need to find is what makes them happy and what makes them feel good. So, um,
Yes,
I
sir.
I lived, I did 35 years of my life without doing any TRT, and I fought at the highest level in the world. Yeah, probably
Wow.
could. You know, would I have maybe the same success I have now? I don't know. I don't know what my body would do. I don't know if my body would handle it or if it would break down but to be truthful, I don't care to find out. I'm happy right where I am,
Yeah.
right? So it's
I think the big thing there too, and I love that you said this because I think it's overlooked and it's important because it's the individualization of it all, is that you need to get your blood work done. You need to do your own checkups with your own physician because otherwise you're throwing darts in the dark. You don't know, right? It's like people always, the first question I always get from people is, what supplements should I take? It's never, this was my blood work. What supplements should I take? And I would still respond to that. Go ask your doctor. I'm not a doctor, right?
yeah,
But that's the precursor, right? You don't know what's going on in your own body unless you look, and you can't do that in a mirror. You have to go and you have to get blood work done. I
right,
just did my blood work myself. I do it twice a year, every single year, which is excessive for someone my age technically, but I don't give a fuck. I want to know because I want to make changes sooner. I don't want to wait till I'm 60 and the doctor's like, hey, this has been bad for 30 years. Find out. It's easy. It's covered under almost every single healthcare policy. And then from that, you can make informed choices about what to do for yourself instead of finger pointing at other people all the time?
yeah. It's insecurities that people have, and those people, even those people behind the keyboards, that have the ability to write those things down. Those are their insecurities that they're flagging out into the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just it's sad because this world has become that, and we don't even notice that we're doing that.
Yeah.
It's very rare you see somebody go online and praise another person.
I know. Isn't that weird? I was just thinking about this the other day. I was like, wow, you never really look in the comments and see someone being like, hey, you really inspired me that weekend. That's great. And mean it. That's the important part.
Yeah,
Is actually mean it, not say it facetiously. But you don't. I don't. It's some product of that. It's the anonymity allows people to feel comfortable saying whatever the hell they want, and that's not how reality works when you're actually out there. So, what are you gonna do? Let trolls be trolls, right? And keeping inspired by the stuff you're doing, Vagner. It's awesome to talk to you always. It's a pleasure. It was really cool watching your match with Luke, and got me really excited about the upcoming ADCC event. Also, just the future of the sport. The fact that people can be doing this for a long time. This is something that you can do as you get older, right?
yeah,
I think from the outside looking in, people think it's crazy or they think that it's too intense. You learn the relationship with your body. You learn how to regulate your training intensity, which is a valuable thing that everyone should be interested in learning more about. And you can do this, and you can impact other people's lives. So it's always a pleasure getting to talk to you and pick your brain and your mindset and what makes you the athlete that you are. So I appreciate it.
thank you for reaching out again and for us doing this again. I hope the listeners that take at least one thing out of this, positively, and hopefully it can change somebody's life in some good way.
Absolutely. Well, I need to come out to Miami now. I think I have a handful of people that I'd love to come out and train and learn from. It's always humbling being on other people's mats and getting to see how things are done. So, if I end up out that way this year, I will absolutely hit you up.
Always welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, friends, Abe here. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and sticking around to the very end. If you want to support it, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or check out www.maynideapodcast.com. Join the mailing list and stay up to date on all things The Mayn Idea, from future guests, sponsorship opportunities, products I'm using to help me perform at my best, invites to ask me anything, and any upcoming pertinent information to the show. I cannot do this show without you. It is literally why I show up each week and put these episodes together. So thank you from the bottom of my heart from being part of the community. I hope you have a great day.